Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. Today's a big day. It's the release day of my new book, Being God's Image, Why Creation Still Matters. If you pre-ordered your copy online, it should be arriving today or within the next day or two. If you've already started reading it, I really hope it's been helpful to you so far. And if it has been, please take a few minutes to write a review online at whatever site you used to find and order books. That would be a big help in spreading the word. Today we're picking up our study of the signs and wonders in Exodus, the 12 signs and wonders, traditionally called the 10 plagues in Exodus, and we're picking up in chapter 10, verse 1. We're going to be studying verses 1 through 6 today, and I'll begin by reading my translation from the Hebrew. Now and again, people ask, what do you mean by your translation? I mean that I read the text in Hebrew and translated it into English myself. So you won't find this precise translation in any of your English Bibles, but it reflects how I understand the Hebrew. So beginning in verse 1, Yahweh said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have made his heart heavy and the heart of his servants, that I might accomplish these signs of mine in his midst, and that you may recount in the ears of your child and your grandchild how I have mocked Egypt, and my signs that I have performed among them, that you may know that I am Yahweh." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, and they said to him, "This is what Yahweh, God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Send away my people, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to send my people away, surely tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory, and they shall cover the surface of the land, so that it will not be possible to see the land. They shall eat the remainder, that which escaped, what was left for you from the hail. They will eat every tree that is sprouting up for you from the field. They will fill your houses and the houses of all your servants and the houses of all Egypt, such as your parents have not seen, nor your parents' parents, from the day they were on the earth until this day." And he turned and left Pharaoh. All right, so we are in the third cycle of signs in Egypt. We are partway through the third cycle, and as I've mentioned in past videos, this cycle is the longest and most intense of all of the cycles. Over the past couple of weeks, we've looked at the sign of hail that destroyed the barley and the flax. Today begins a probably three-part exploration of the sign of the locusts, and it's going to take us 3 weeks because it's just such a long account, and there's so much to talk about. The locusts are going to destroy the wheat and the emmer, the next crops to come up, and decimate Egypt's food supply. The first thing you might have noticed as I was reading is that Yahweh made Pharaoh's heart heavy. And that might have struck you as a little bit strange because I've explained in other videos that Pharaoh is the one to make his own heart heavy, and that having a heavy heart means either that he's unresponsive to Yahweh or that he is guilty of injustice, or a combination of these two ideas. And in other places, Pharaoh's the one doing this to himself. Yahweh makes his heart firm, but Pharaoh's the only one who makes his heart heavy. This is the one exception to that pattern. It's possible that what we have here is a telescoping. Normally, we hear about the state of Pharaoh's heart at the end of each sign. Here, we're being told at the beginning of the sign that Pharaoh has a heavy heart. And it's possible that it's telescoping what happens as a result of Yahweh making Pharaoh's heart firm. That is, because this is the only place where it talks about Yahweh making Pharaoh's heart heavy, it could be the exception that proves the rule, showing that Yahweh's making his heart firm is going to result in a heavy heart because of Pharaoh's own free choice. So that's one possible way of reckoning with this maybe difficult text. We're told that God is going to accomplish a sign or set a sign in Egypt. And this is the same phrase as what we see in Genesis 4:15 when God sets a sign on Cain so that no one will harm him or try to get revenge on him for the killing of his brother. So in both cases, what we have is a warning not to mess with Yahweh. Yahweh is setting a sign as a way of saying, don't mess with me. I'm protecting someone here. In this case, he's protecting the Hebrews and bringing judgment on the Egyptians. Verse 2 talks about Yahweh making a mockery of Egypt, that is, exposing Egypt's foolishness. So this is really strong language. In some contexts in the Old Testament, the language is even used for abusive situations. Here, Yahweh is not abusing Egypt, but rather exposing Egypt's foolishness. And there's been a pattern of these kinds of moments throughout the signs and wonders. So Pharaoh had called for the death of Hebrew boys in the Nile in chapter 1, and so then Yahweh turned the Nile to blood, giving Pharaoh what he wanted. Of course, it's the next Pharaoh, but literally there's a connection. The Egyptians treat the Hebrews with disgust and think of them as odious, or that they stink. And so Yahweh gives piles of stinking frogs. The Egyptians work the Hebrews as animals and do not treat them with dignity, so Yahweh kills the Egyptians' work animals. The Egyptians described the Hebrews as a swarm in chapter 1, and Yahweh sent swarms to invade them in the signs and wonders. So we can see that the punishment fits the crime throughout the signs and wonders. In verse 4, we have an interesting little note that God is going to affect all the territory of Egypt. He says he's going to bring locusts into your territory. He says this to Pharaoh. This is an interesting callback to chapter 9, verse 29, where Moses announces that as a result of these signs and wonders, Pharaoh will come to know that the land belongs to Yahweh. So it could be that when Yahweh announces through Moses that the locusts are coming on your territory, he could be saying this in the sense of mockery. So you claim this land as yours? Okay, fine. I'm going to bring locusts into your territory, and we'll see how much control you actually have over it. In other words, it's another episode in the teaching Pharaoh that the land really belongs to Yahweh. In verse 5, we have a strange expression in Hebrew. I translated it that the locusts will cover the surface of the land. The Hebrew actually says the eye of the land. The locust will cover the eye of the land. And so there are a couple of ways we could read this or understand this. One is we could understand it as a figure of speech known as metonymy. That is, everywhere the eye could see is being shortened to the eye of the land. So eye is standing in for everywhere the eye could see. So in other words, God's going to bring so many locusts that everywhere you look, that's what you'll see, which is why I translated cover the surface of the land. This is, of course, ironic, and Prop points this out in his commentary on page 336. He says, covering the eye in a manner previously unseen so that it cannot be seen. So there's 3 layers of play on this idea of seeing. But there's another possibility that is fascinating, and that is that the eye stands for the sun, because in Egyptian thought, the sun was thought to be the right eye of the god Ra, or sometimes called Re, the sun god. And so by covering the eye of the land, that is, the swarms are so dense that they cover the sunshine. You can't see the sun shining. And therefore it symbolizes the defeat of Ra. That would be an intriguing way of reading this passage. This sign of locusts adds insult to injury because, as I mentioned in the previous sign, the hail destroyed the flax and barley. Now the wheat and emmer or spelt is destroyed by the locusts. They're going to eat everything. And nothing in living memory has surpassed this devastation. We're told, such as your parents have not seen, nor your parents' parents. So this is something that they're going to tell to their children and their children's children, but their parents and parents' parents have never seen anything like this. So nothing in living memory has surpassed this destruction. And then we have a statement at the very end of our selection for today in verse 6, where we're told that Moses turned and left Pharaoh. This is interesting because it's pronounced dramatically. Pharaoh doesn't allow him to go. Moses just of his own accord turns and walks out, which foreshadows the exit of the Hebrews that is coming in just a couple chapters, that they're going to turn and leave Egypt. This shows, in a sense, that Moses is in charge. He's now calling the shots. Pharaoh can't stop him from leaving. So it's an ominous foreshadowing, if you're Pharaoh, of what is still to come. Next week, we will look at the negotiations between Pharaoh and Moses about who is allowed to go, which is really fascinating. Until then, have a great week and happy reading.